Hey, and welcome back to Soul Podcasting, the space where we don't just talk about podcasting as content, we treat it like the soul of your brand. I'm your host, Demetria Zinga. I'm your podcast coach, strategist, and founder of the Soul Podcasting Collective, where we help visionary creatives and entrepreneurs launch, grow, and repurpose podcasts that sound like their purpose, not just their profession. So today's topic is something I've seen so many creatives navigate, maybe even you. So how do you evolve your brand voice without losing the essence of who you are? Whether you've been podcasting for a while or you're in the messy middle of a rebrand or a pivot, today I want to remind you that evolution doesn't mean erasing everything you've ever been and ever known. You can grow, refine, expand, and still stay rooted. So let's get into how you keep the soul of your brand intact while elevating your message for the next level. If you're ready to launch or relaunch your podcast with clarity and confidence, don't skip this step. I highly recommend that you grab my Launch Confidently Podcasting Checklist. It's my proven guide for getting your message out without the mess. From setup to soul alignment, this checklist walks you through the essentials of building a podcast that feels like you. It's sort of a get started guide. So if you're just getting started with your podcast, this checklist definitely can help you out. So the link is in the show notes. Go ahead and grab it now. All right, so this is the segment of the podcast where I love to set the mood, and I ask you to take a deep breath and let the noise fade. This is your creative CEO time where you show up not as a content machine, but as a creative visionary. You don't need to overthink all of this. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You're allowed to shift, expand, and explore, and you can still be true to your roots. So gather your favorite things for getting into your CEO mode, whether that's your journal, your favorite drink, getting cozy in your favorite chair, or if you happen to be multitasking, keep doing the thing that you're doing right now and stay motivated while listening to the rest of this. Go ahead and turn up the volume and enjoy a little music, and we'll come back with some tips and advice that I hope to encourage you along your podcasting journey. So let's talk real. Your message is growing, your brand is maturing, you're not the same person who launched your podcast a year ago or even 6 months ago. But here's the tension that we all feel. How do you grow into new territory without confusing your audience or abandoning your foundation? I'm going to break this down to you in a way that gives you permission to evolve without the guilt. We all have to grow and evolve because we are multi-dimensional, multi-layered human beings that change over time. The way I started my podcast years ago is not the way I am today and not the way I will be a couple of years from now. So that evolving is a sign of depth. It's a sign of being human, and it's not a sign of disconnection. So when your voice evolves, it means you're listening to your life. You're paying attention to your experiences, your audience, and the shifts in your values and your goals. This isn't abandoning your brand. It's actually deepening your brand. So for an example, when I've moved away from putting so much of my podcasting soul, my love to some of my other podcasts, Christian Homeschool Moms and Her Business Elevated, and began to pour more of my time and energy into soul podcasting, it's not a rejection of my past. In fact, I'm actually still hosting those shows. And one of them, Mompreneurs and Heels I no longer host, these decisions have been a recognition of my growth, moving from one stage in my life to the next. So I didn't start over, but what I did is I built on top of a solid foundation. And each shift brought me closer to my core mission, which is helping women rise in their voice and in their purpose. So here's the key. Your values are the roots that hold your brand steady, even when the messaging evolves. So you need to ask yourself, what do I always come back to? What principles drive the way that I serve my audience? And what energy do I want my podcast to carry now and always? So whether your audience changes or your content shifts slightly, if your values stay consistent, your brand voice stays recognizable. So it's really not so much about how much you've changed as much as it is about how much your values have stayed the same. And just keep showing up. Your values are going to shine through whatever your content is. And your presence on that show will still remain a force and a foundation for your episodes. Let me say this plainly. If your podcast format is starting to feel like a box instead of a container, it is time to switch things up, my friend. Maybe your intro sounds robotic now. Maybe you created segments that once felt innovative, but now they feel tired or disconnected from who you are today. And maybe you're realizing that your voice has shifted, the way you speak, the tone you carry, even your energy on the mic. It's all evolved, and that is okay. I remember changing up my intro so many times on one of my former podcasts. The Mompreneurs and Heels podcast used to be the Web Success Strategies podcast back in 2014. And so I had reached out to an audio voiceover guy on Fiverr and had him create me an intro that I really loved. I used it for about a year or so. And then as my podcast began to change directions and I started talking more to mompreneurs and women in business, it just didn't seem to synchronize with what I was doing on the show. So I had my intro recreated, and then I changed up my segments, and the things that I was starting to talk about were more geared toward moms in business. And so at that time, I really felt disjointed from my previous show content. So the content itself was fine, but I was talking to kind of everyone and no one at the same time. I was just throwing my information out there with no true audience in mind. But what I noticed is that the people who were listening to me the most were the moms in business and women entrepreneurs. And so even though I'd always had in the back of my mind that that's who I eventually wanted to reach, on the show itself, on the podcast itself, I was just kind of throwing out my information to anyone and everyone. And what I learned through that process, the first year or so, is that I needed to be a lot more strategic and specific about who I wanted to reach, who my audience should be. So I really locked in on not just women entrepreneurs, but even on a smaller niche of moms in particular who were trying to do business from home, not necessarily moms who owned and operated businesses at a brick and mortar establishment. I was looking to reach those moms who wanted to start their business online, a virtual business from the comforts of their home while raising their kids. So that was the difference in how I would approach my topics and made it a lot more specific for that niche. So what I'm saying is that as I learned what my new audience would be, I outgrew my original format, which eventually led me to have to revamp the entire podcast, change the name of the show, and really hone in on the audience that I wanted to have. So I'm giving you permission to explore and to see where your heart is leading you. Remember that you're not locked into your original format. Podcasting is not a contract that you have to stay in. It doesn't have to stay the same forever. I want you to look at podcasting as a canvas for your growth. You're painting that picture. You're an artist. You get to put on that canvas whatever you want, whatever colors you want, and you get to take those brush strokes the way you want them to go and use whatever size brush you want to use. This is your canvas. But a lot of podcasters get stuck because they feel like they're betraying their brand if they pivot. But let me flip that on its head, because you're not betraying your brand. You're actually being honest with it. I went through this myself, like I said, with the web success strategies that turned into Mompreneurs to Heals. And I remember when I first launched Christian Homeschool Moms, I had this specific tone, format, and vibe that really served me well at that time. And as the years went on, my life changed as a homeschool mom. I became more of a veteran homeschool mama. Then from there, I became no longer a homeschooling mama, but someone with advice. I just wanted to be just kind of this source of inspiration for those mamas who are starting to homeschool. So not being in the trenches anymore the same as I was before has really changed the way that I show up on that show. Also, my Her Business Elevated podcast has evolved so much. When I first started that podcast, I was, again, kind of throwing my sticks out there, just trying to see where they landed and, just throwing my seeds out to see if they took root in the soil. I didn't know what soil I needed to be reaching, but I knew that I had a message for women in business, and I just didn't know specifically who I was talking to. In other words, I had more of a general idea than I had a specific idea. I do want to encourage you, don't allow the idea of you're not being very sure at first what you want to do and who you're trying to reach keep you from starting your show. So I started Her Business Elevated because I knew it would be a show for solopreneurs, for women in business. And actually, to be honest, I wasn't even so sure that I would focus on solopreneurs in the beginning. So if you go back and listen to any of those episodes, you'll see that I kind of began the show with the idea that I was reaching entrepreneurs in general, women entrepreneurs, and I would interview women from different aspects of life who were entrepreneurs, just completely different aspects of life. So from motivational speakers to the stay-at-home mom who ran a business from home and everything in between, we had authors and life coaches and everyone in between. And so I kind of was getting my juices running and my ideas flowing about who I wanted to reach. Still didn't really know what I was exactly doing with that show. At some point, it turned into more of a faith-inspired show for women of faith in business. And then from there, it's even transitioned into something a little bit less about the faith and more about the CEO mindset. So I have gone through some real changes on Her Business Elevated and definitely have seen what the results of shifting and transitioning can do for a podcast, whether, those who are listening are on board with those changes or not, or whether I'm attracting the kind of people I want or not. That shows up with every transition I make. But I have to be true to myself, right? And so now when I'm showing up there, it's on my own terms. I am only there about once a month, and I'm really happy with that pattern of showing up there once a month because that fits my schedule. And I love having these new conversations with entrepreneurs to really encourage other women in business with new energy. And I love this direction I'm going in there. But again, I transitioned into soul podcasting back in 2023 or so, maybe a little bit before that. Not because I was confused, but because I had clarity. I really wanted to get back into this podcast support that I had started initially way back in 2006. And I wanted to relaunch this and come back just as strong as I had started over 20 years ago. So I came back, not because I had stopped podcasting at any point, but because now I knew that I really wanted to focus my energy there and to help creatives, women entrepreneurs as well, with their podcasting support, not just, the solopreneur, but really focus on the thing that I loved and I have been loving for 2 decades. So every step of the way, I realigned my format with my message. And guess what? My audience came with me. Right? I didn't lose anybody. I actually gained, and I gained the right audience. Now, I won't say I didn't lose anybody. I'm pretty sure I've lost a few people along the way. That's just inevitable. But as far as the right people, I didn't lose the right people. And I gained even more of the right people. The ones who are also evolving right along with me, who want the content I have when I'm offering it at that point in their life. So Don't be afraid. If you're feeling stuck in your current structure, just ask yourself, what part of my format no longer fits? What am I doing that doesn't fit my lifestyle, where I'm going, what I want to talk about? And then ask yourself, what would feel more easeful and exciting to create? Like, where's my voice trying to go? Figure that part out. Where does your voice want to go? What do you want to say? What message is really burning in your soul right now? You don't need a full rebrand to make changes. You really don't. You might want to rebrand. And if so, then go in that direction. But you don't have to fully rebrand. You just need permission to adjust things just a little bit. Try some small experiments. So here's some ideas. Try adding a new segment that reflects where your passion is right now. Add a new segment. See how that flows into your content. You can even record a solo episode off script just to see what flows. Like, don't even have a script. Just see what happens to you, what happens when you're in front of the microphone. No script, no outline. What are you doing? What are you talking about? How is your heart sharing your message with your potential audience? This is really a great exercise to implement because you will be surprised at what starts to flow out of you when you're not under pressure and you're just talking as though you're talking to a friend. So try it and see what happens. It might give you some ideas about what you may want to start talking about in the future. Then refresh your intro music or your tagline. This all is just there to help you reflect the growth that you've accomplished so far, right? Changing up your music. I'm known for changing my music quite often. My intro music typically stays the same. Two of my podcasts, the Her Business Elevated and the Mompreneurs and Heels shows, were ones where I changed the intro a few times, the intro music, and it just worked for those shows. But Christian Homeschool Moms has pretty much remained the same for the past 13 years or so. You also want to just speak in your real voice, not the one that you think sounds professional. It's okay to have a podcast voice, but you want to speak in your authentic voice. And these little shifts might seem small, but they're incredibly powerful. They signal to your audience that you're not stuck. You're just self-aware, right? That's the kind of authenticity that people trust. All right, so let's get into a little challenge I have for you right now, because I know that this is, okay, it might sting a little bit, but some of y'all are resisting change, not because you don't know what to do next, but because you're afraid of being misunderstood. You don't want to ruffle feathers. You don't want to lose listeners. You don't want people to say, oh, she's switching things up again. There she goes again. There he goes again. But here's the truth. Staying in your comfort zone is way more confusing than it is evolving. Audiences are smart. They can sense when you've outgrown your message. They can feel when you're being phony or trying to stay on brand instead of just being real. And while they may not consciously name it, they feel the disconnection. So do you really think pivoting is going to confuse people? Honestly, shrinking and holding back is what confuses them. You're much more magnetic when you're in motion, like when your energy matches your message. I've had listeners tell me they stuck with me not because I kept everything the same, but because they watched me grow, and that growth gave them permission to also grow. I could say the same for my YouTube channel, right? My homeschool channel on YouTube was as raw and open and authentic as it can be. And today I'm embarrassed at some of my videos. They're so cringy, but I've left them up. Most of them at least, just so that, those who were interested in learning about homeschooling back in the day, 2011 or so is when I started, 2010, 11, I think I did my first video. And I mean, it's so raw, but I leave it up because those who were interested at the time were able to watch my growth and felt like they were also doing the homeschool thing right along with me. So I would show the world what I'm doing in my home with my kids, my curriculum choices, some of my thought processes along the way, some of the things I struggled with, and how I fixed the things that I'm struggling with or maybe was not able to find solutions for. But that kind of authenticity is what at the time my viewers wanted to see. And with time, I started to show up with more resources and opinions, and my channel became a little bit of a louder voice to make a statement about certain things in the homeschool community that I thought needed to be addressed. And because I'd already established somewhat of an authentic relationship, I guess, with my audience, they were kind of troopers with me. They were there. They, stuck it out with me. And, I had some videos that sparked some controversy, right? That stirred some feathers and got people really antsy. And it was concerning because it really showed what was happening, in homeschooling and what was going on behind the scenes, and the undercurrent that was present. It was showing up. Right. And I say that in a very tasteful way, but there were definitely some negative undercurrents happening. And I spoke out on some things, and some things I just, said it in a way that I knew would be palatable, but also would show what's happening. Right. And so that was my life years ago. No longer is my life today. No longer is my calling in that particular area. I just feel that now I'm more of sort of this guide to, help the homeschool mom as a veteran homeschool mom, help shine the path and just be that guiding light for them. But I am really at more of a very comfortable standstill with my podcast over there now and what I'm doing there. And I've just sort of parked it, and I'm just a resource. I'm just available. And that's how I show up there now. But in those years, in the heavier years of my homeschooling from 2012 until about 2019 or so, I was making a lot of noise over there. And I think it was good noise and it was needful. But, that takes energy, right? And it takes a calling and it takes a mission, and you have to know why your voice is needful in that arena. So my point is that I've evolved, and that is my personal example to you of how things have changed and how the evolution of myself is something that I'm constantly thinking of and reflecting, because I think that's part of every podcaster's journey. Is if you stick with this thing long enough, you will watch your evolution and you will see the things that you felt 10 years ago, you no longer feel that way, right? It doesn't mean you have to leave your audience completely, but you may have to. You may have to shut down your project, but until such time as that is needed, as long as you're still in the podcasting game and you're still contributing to that audience, you have a place in their hearts, and you're always going to be evolving, and your audience will also evolve, and you'll get new people on board. So that's where I am now with that show. So if you're scared of switching things up, I totally get it, but I want to lovingly push you forward and encourage you to let your listeners evolve with you, bring them along the journey with you, share what's shifting in your show and why. Let your pivot be a story and not a secret. And that's how you build brand loyalty, not by staying the same, but by staying true to yourself. People don't just follow content, they follow character, they follow conviction. And that, my friend, is what elevates your podcast beyond a platform into a movement. So what I really want you to hear is that your evolution is not just for you. It's for everyone that you're meant to impact. We're in a season of visible growth. People are craving leadership that's not just polished, but honest. When one of the most powerful things you can do as a podcaster is to model that growth in real time. You don't have to wait until it's all figured out. You don't need a perfect rebrand. You don't need a fancy strategy before you speak from your next level. You just need courage. Think about the people listening to your podcast right now, the ones that are watching your journey unfold. And when they hear you say, hey, I'm shifting my format to reflect my current message, or you say something like, hey, I'm evolving how I show up because I've grown up. What you're really saying is, it's okay for you to grow too. And that's leadership. That is legacy. I've watched clients go from playing small and hiding behind on-brand, air quotes, perfection, to finally saying the thing that they really wanted to say. And that's that's exactly when their show took off. That's when their audience leaned in because it's real, right? It was now, it was them. So don't hide your evolution. Think about it this way. You're documenting your evolution. You're talking about your evolution, and you're making it a part of your story. Whether it's a mindset shift or a new niche or a fresh tone in your delivery, let that shift become part of your legacy. Your listeners aren't just here for the tips that you have to give them. They're here for a transformation, and they need to see you do it first. So if you're listening to all of this and you're thinking, okay, it's time, I need to do things differently. Again, I want to invite you to download that Launch Confidently podcasting checklist that I mentioned at the beginning of the show. It's not just for first-time podcasters, it's for evolving podcasters. So if you're a first-time podcaster, definitely this is going to help you. But if you're evolving and you've been doing this a while, those of you who are ready to get back to the heart of your message and clean up the clutter, start podcasting with sharper strategy and deeper soul, I want you to download that in the show notes because it is a practical, actionable checklist created with you in mind. All right, so I'm just going to wrap this up today, and I want you to remember that you are allowed to evolve. Your voice is allowed to shift. You can grow, pivot, reimagine, and still be deeply rooted in who you are. This next season of your podcast, let it reflect your growth and let it be bolder and wiser, truer to match up to who you are today. And if you're ready to evolve your podcast with the kind of support that actually meets your needs, whether that's strategy coaching or editing and production help, or just a chance to talk it through with someone who totally gets it, I'd love to invite you to a free coffee chat. All right, my friend, this is a no pressure 20-minute call. We're going to look at what's working for you, what's not, where you want to go next. Depending on your goals, we can talk about coaching or editing support, or just brainstorm how to get you unstuck. You might even want an audit at some point. So during that 20-minute call, that's where we're going to talk about what your next steps are so that we have an opportunity to figure out how we can work together in the future. So this is a no pressure call, you and I with a cup of coffee or tea or whatever we like to drink. Visit me at soulpodcasting.com or DM me on Instagram at soulpodcasting, and let's get you moving towards your next level. I can't wait to hear from you. I'm leaving in the show notes that link for that free coffee chat. And until next time, my friend, stay aligned, stay soulful, and remember your voice has work to do in this world. Happy podcasting.